G'day YouTube, it's Turbo Tristan. Welcome back to part 2 of fixing the K20 swapped EG Civic. The car is in primer. It's in its first coat of primer. I've yet to sand it back and sand out all the runs and things. This is the rear quarter repair that I've done. Now it looks pretty good on camera, but I'll tell you a little secret. In real life, it's definitely not perfect. There's a little bit of a flat spot here and here where it transitions on the curve. You probably will only notice it once I've put the nice glossy white paint on there. There's also a couple of sinkholes where the body filler had some air bubbles in, and when I've sanded them down, it's left a miniature crater. They're really small. Not sure if the camera will pick it up, but there's some little dots there which I'm going to have to try and fill in with primer and then sand them out again. But overall, very satisfying, nice and smooth. This pillar, I'm really happy with this. It came up really good, and we've got the guard all sorted. It was pretty well perfect anyways. In the last video, I didn't really explain much of the process. I just sort of went ahead and did everything, brought you guys along for the ride. So today, we're just going to explain what I've done, how I've done it, why I did it. Step 1, you need to clean everything down. The car had accident grime, which was the black stuff all up the side of the car. Step 2, jack up the car, get the wheels off, get it up on jack stands so it's nice and high. You can work around the car, get in, under, above, all the way around. And then step 3, sandpapering. You got to do it, you got to start. So you can start with as light a grade sandpaper as you want, or as heavy as you want. The heavier you go, the more sanding with the lighter stuff you're going to have to do to sort of polish the surface. So say if you start with an 80 grit, it's going to really tear the paint off straight away, which is great. Saves you a lot of work, but you do tend to see a lot of file marks in the primer and in the bog and everything like that weeks and months later, and you can notice the car's had a repair. So if you start with a heavy grade of sandpaper to knock off the clear coat, to knock down any body filler and anything like that, just be mindful that you will need to go over it. So for example, if you started with an 80, you'll then go to a 120 or maybe a 180, and then a 360 or a 400, just to get it nice and smooth to primer. And then once you've primed the car, you'll need to then give that a smooth off, get out any imperfections, any runs or drips with a 400 or a 600, and then it's ready to paint. So once you've got everything ready and you're ready to paint the car, there's a couple of tips that I like to do. I learnt these a long time ago off a friend of mine who was pretty experienced, and it all makes sense, which is why I've kept doing it, and it seems to work for me. So before you do any painting, obviously you've got to shake up the can, get everything nice and mixed together. But one thing that I like to do is take the jug, boil the kettle, transfer the water into a pot and sit the paint cans in there. What this does is makes the liquid inside the can a lot more viscous, a lot runnier, and it also increases the pressure inside the can. So just like when you see people on drag videos or racing shows and they heat up the NOS bottle, or they put a NOS bottle warmer, it actually makes the pressure inside the bottle a lot higher. So it does the same thing for a paint can. Make sure you get a nice even flow of paint. Seems to work well for me. And it makes sure that when you get towards the end of the paint can, if it's still nice and warm, it's going to minimize the spitting or the spraying of paint drops or blobs everywhere. Another thing that you need to do between coats is give the nozzle a bit of a spray out, a clean out. So you can do that by just spraying away from the car and make sure there's no drips or blobs in front of the nozzle to block it off. Or what I do sometimes is I take it off and I just blow in the back of it so it gets just some clean air through there, and make sure that the pathway out of the nozzle is nice and clean and it doesn't dry up, clog up, or make any weird spray patterns. So you want to make sure everything is consistent. You've probably heard this a billion times, but preparation is the key. I've sprayed a car in a carport without sheets or anything down, and it turned out pretty good, even though at the same time My next door neighbour decided that they wanted to mow the lawn right after I put fresh wet 2-pack down on the car, which really sucked, but came out all right. Spend a lot of time masking things off, making sure that all of your lines are nice and straight, so when you peel that off, it doesn't peel paint with it, and it doesn't leave any paint through on places that you don't want it. Make sure there's plenty of light, fluoro light, natural light, whatever you can do, and make sure that the surfaces that you're painting are as warm as can be. If it's a freezing cold day and the surface that you're painting is cold, then when the paint hits it, it's not going to start to dry, it's going to start to run. So that's another thing that you don't want. If the surface is warm, the paint has a tendency to stick to it. Today's pretty windy, so I'm not going to do actual painting. I'm going to do priming stuff today. So priming really doesn't matter as much because you need to sand it in between painting anyway, and you got to clean it again anyway. So hopefully tomorrow or the next day is much warmer and we can throw some paint on, because I really want to get this out of my garage and get my car back so I can start doing more driving. That's enough chit chat. I've probably left plenty of things out, but I'm going to get stuck into work again. Lay down another coat of primer here on this rear quarter, and there's a little spot I need to do under the sill in front of the guard there, and then it's over to work on the bumper and the front lip. So you would have just seen two really weird things, and you're probably sitting at home scratching your head. The first of which is I was purposefully putting a lot of runs in this quarter panel here, and what I was doing was a technique called Tristan just made it up on the spot, and I was spraying primer into all of the pinholes to try and fill those in on the body filler. So when I put the body filler on, unbeknownst to me, there's a couple of air bubbles in there, really small pinhole ones, and when you sand the body filler away and get a nice smooth surface, when you smooth those off, you're left with these little tiny pinholes. So rather than bog the whole car again and then sand it again and then hope that you don't get pinholes in it, I've gone ahead and sprayed primer into those pinholes, and I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that when I sand that down finally for paint, that will fill most of those in and it'll be nice and smooth and you won't see them. So the other weird thing is I don't have any actual face masks for painting. I'm using the COVID mask, and I've got to say, COVID, you can't see, you can't smell it, you can't taste it, but paint, you can see it, you can smell it, there's dust, everything like that, it still gets in here, so no good for painting, that's for sure. So I'm going to let that dry, go hard, and then I'm going to come back and sand that off. For now, I'm going to go to another part of the backyard which you guys haven't seen, and I'm going to finish smoothing off the front bumper and then do the same thing with that. Give it another prime with a nice thick coat of primer so I can rub it back with some 400 or 600 and get it ready for paint. So that's the priming done, and the wet sand you've just seen on time lapse. I used 400 grit sandpaper, and what you want it to look like when you're finished is when it's wet, you want it to look like it's been painted. So it's going to be glossy and shiny, and then when it dries off, it's going to go a little bit chalky, a little bit powdery. So to give you an example, when it's like this, the car looks like it's been painted, it's nice and shiny, everything looks glassy. It's a good idea to rub your hand all over it to feel everything. You'll be able to feel every rough spot, every patch, every bump, every dimple, all the way along. And that's where you need to go back over. So if you feel anything, you rub your hand over there, nice wet surface. It's going to feel nice and glassy and smooth, just like a wet car with brand new paint on it. Nice and glassy. Now that same panel, if you dry it off, it's going to be very matte finish. And you'll see there it's just drying off now. Now it's gone back to looking dull and matte. So that's exactly what you want. My little hack and my little cheat of putting the runs in the primer and spraying it into those little pinholes worked for, say, 90% of them, the small ones. There's a couple of big ones there, and some of the runs that I put in were so bad I had to sand it back, and I actually went back through the primer, but I'm just going to hit those couple of spots there. You'll see the same thing on the door, but good news is I got them all out. The front guard's pretty much perfect. All the A-pillar and the roof line is all good, all perfect. I've got to do the same on the mirrors and door handle. And the next time I see you will be when we're ready to paint. It's finally painting day. I've gone down to Complete Auto Paints in Springvale. They've mixed me up a whole bunch of cans. I think I've got 6 cans of 2-pack white, which is the factory color for the car. I've washed it down with water. I have dried the car. I have also wax and grease remove it, everything. Let that dry off for about half an hour. I've got the front bar here as well. I've set that up on the bin. I'm going to wheel that inside, put the roller door down, and start blowing in the door jambs and around all the edges. So you do that first, let that sort of tack off, and then get on to painting the panels. I've also gone ahead and sanded down the bonnet. I sanded off all the black stuff. I didn't do any body work. I used 80 grit sandpaper, so it's really rough, and then I just gave it a very light hit with some primer. And if there's any paint left over, I'm going to give it a very small squirt with some 2-pack just to cover those metal spots. We're still going to get a bonnet, and we're still going to paint that and do that properly. But for now, this is where we're at. The panel looks pretty good. It's not 100%. It was never going to be. And there are still some very small pinholes in there. Pretty smooth. I'm happy with it. I think Ty and Tommy will be happy with it. And I'm pretty sure this is going to be just a track car anyway. But still a pretty fun project. I'm going to set up the tripod and get to work blowing in the door jambs, around the window frame, along the edge of the guards, and around where the tail light goes, and around the wheel arches. And then we'll get stuck into laying paint on the panels. The way these 2-pack pressure paint cans work is you put the color in the top. In the bottom there is a membrane which needs to be punctured, and that's got the 2-pack hardener in there. That's the thing that makes the paint nice and hard and stays glossy and doesn't wear and tear like normal acrylic paint. So you take this little button, put that right there on the end, punch it through. A little needle will go through the diaphragm, and then you shake the hell out of it, and then that's actually going to mix the hardener in with the paint, and then you're ready to go. So it's really straightforward. Anyone can do it, anyone can use it, and it's a really great invention. So it saves you going and buying an air compressor for, you know, I say small jobs, but it really is a small job. So this is one I've been shaking up for around 5 minutes. It's all activated, the hardener's in there. So what I'm going to do is go around and blow in all of the door jambs and around all the window frames and everything. Hopefully I don't get any runs. That's where you'll get all the drips that will be on all of your edges. So you want to be real careful with that. Little test spray. And then just go around the edges. where there's a small edge like this, you can just sort of do that bit. And then around the back here as well, underneath that line. Under and around the guard. And then this is going to be a tricky part along this top edge here. This is going to take a couple of passes, I can tell. It's probably time I put one of these on. It's better than nothing. You don't really want to be breathing this stuff in. Keep going along the top edges. Down along the inside edge of the window frame. You've got to be real mindful of your back and where you're rubbing against. So I swear that was dry. We'll come back to that. There we go, that'll work. And just like that, we've blown in all the edges. Used a whole can of paint to do that, so it's pretty important. And you definitely don't want to go too heavy. So you'll see I was very cautious, just little spray, make sure there's no runs, make sure I'm getting even coverage. Once it settles, you can sort of go over it again lightly, and then just keep going around all the edges until everything's done. There's a couple of spots which I'll take you up and show you in the back end look really good already, and it's only the first coat and it's only just blowing in the edges, but it looks really awesome. So far pretty happy. Let's puncture the next can. pump all that hardener in there, shake it up and get on to painting the bumper, blowing the corners in on that. I'm going to move that undercover now that I've done this edge. Just be very careful moving around, making sure I don't brush up against anything. I already sort of did when I was struggling to keep that door open, but for now that will do. You'll have just seen in the time lapse that it's all painted. Didn't take very long at all. I've used 4 cans. When I got to the dregs of the cans, I just set them aside and I used it to fix up that little part on the edge of the bonnet, just for fun. You can really polish a turd. It's going to look a lot better than it did, that's for sure. So let's take a look at my painting skills, or lack thereof. Looks pretty good on camera, I've got to say. And this rear quarter here looks absolutely awesome in real life as well. Came out perfectly glossy. Same up over the roof line. Down the A-pillar, perfect. This guard looks really good as well. Pretty good job. The door, I've only just finished that last. There's a little bit of a matte patch or a flat patch in the middle. We'll see how that finishes once the paint finishes drying off. And now over to the rear quarter. You can probably see in the reflections there. This is how important all your prep work is. You can start to see all the ripples now that there's a bit of gloss on that panel. Definitely looks better than it did before, but you can certainly see all the shortcuts, all the mistakes. But let's be honest, that guard was absolutely trashed, and now it's acceptable. There are some things, you'll notice my fingertip is white. When the spray sprays out, it sort of sprays up and then sort of back in a curl. You can't help it, it gets on your fingertip and then it drips down over the nozzle, and then that makes splatter patterns happen on the paint. They sort of sit pretty flat after a minute. And the good thing is when you cut and buff the car, 90% of those go away anyway, so not too worried. We'll see what it looks like in an hour or so, once it's had time to harden off. It's around about 25, 26 degrees today. So nice warm day, should dry pretty quickly and evenly. Pretty low wind, so hopefully I don't get too many bugs or dirt or dust or bits of flowers or anything in the paint job, but we'll see. Those of you OG subscribers will recognize this shirt. This is the shirt that I painted and resprayed and pulled apart and roadworthied and did everything possible on my EK Civic when I first got it. I used to wear this shirt, even though it's white, still came out all right. It's been through the wars, this one, but it's one of my favorite shirts with the chopsticks and the awesome JDM rim there. I've got the bumper painted. It's out the front in the sun, drying. I've yet to paint the mirror covers, the door handle, those types of things. But I have done in satin black already the side strip and the front bumper lip, so that's pretty awesome. That'll go on the bumper and then straight onto the car, so that's going to look sweet when that goes on. You can see probably there's a little run that wants to happen. There's going to be runs. You definitely don't want them, but they're certainly not the end of the world on a flat coloured surface. Plain white, plain black, plain red, plain yellow. Most of the Honda Hero colours, they're pretty easy. You can sand the paint down with 1500 or 2000, get it smooth, and you'll never notice there was a drip there. Well guys, it's a few days later. The last video you would have seen was me painting the car. It's now been about probably 4 days after I've painted it, and I've put it all together. The reason why I did that and didn't show you guys is because you saw me take it apart. It's exactly the same. Don't want to waste your time. But let's check out the finished product, shall we? Around the front, I've put on the lower lip spoiler. I didn't have all the clips. They weren't supplied, so I just used a couple of screws and some cable ties and some double-sided tape. Should stay on there. Down in the front, I modified the bumper and put an air vent directly into the cold air intake there. So now we actually do have airflow going in, so much cooler inlet temperatures at the track. I've also blacked out the center of the grills on all 3 holes. The masking job wasn't perfect, and when I peeled it off, it took some of the paint with it. So, you know, I tried, guys. Onto the bonnet. I didn't do any body work on that. I just sanded it back with 80 grit, so basically just rocks, and grinded off all the black rubber that was on the bonnet from when it hit the barrier. And then I just gave it a little touch of primer. Didn't do anything to it, and then anytime I was at the end of a can and I was about to run out, I just sprayed on that section. So I guess it's been painted, but I painted over crash. I painted over dents and scratches, and I didn't really care too much about that because we are going to be replacing the bonnet eventually. The guard came out perfect, silky smooth, really happy with that. The bumper came out pretty good as well. You can still see there's a couple of ripples here where the number plate had been pushed in and dented the bumper, so I filled those holes in and just gave it a smooth look. The door, pretty good. Nice even coverage. It's certainly not perfect. I haven't cut it or buffed it or polished it or anything, and there's even some little runs and little spit marks in there, but we're going to leave those. This is the part that you guys all want to see, and that is the rear quarter. So up close, on camera, it's probably still going to look really awesome. It's not perfect, guys. I'm not going to lie to you. There are still some pinholes where it's sunk into the body filler. And as much as I tried to sand those down and start again, they're pretty unavoidable. I'm not an expert at putting that stuff on. And you can see there's some flat spots over the body line there. But I did my very best. That's over the guard. So fairly smooth. Down here it's pretty sweet. And I've satin blacked the strips on this side to match the side skirts, to match this rear spoiler, to match the little line under the back bumper, and to match the front lip spoiler. But being that this side of the car is all still factory, it's got the metallic grey strips on that side. I didn't want to take them off and paint them because it would mean removing parts of the interior. It's all good. It's all back together, back to its former glory. There's still an issue with the door. It sags down, and then when you want to shut it again, it's really crooked, guys. I've tried to straighten the hinges. I've used different hinges, and you can see it hangs back quite a bit. I'm sure there's a way I can adjust it, but I'm not a body shop and I don't really know how. The hinges down here, I've tried to adjust those, but it doesn't really want to play ball. Seats back in. It didn't get very dirty. Tried to keep it out of the dust and everything. Gave the interior a bit of a clean. It's definitely not perfect, but it is a 30-year-old car. And I took this rubber window strip out and I got 90% of it on. I got all this side on, I got all the top on, I got all the way down here on, and I couldn't squeeze it in underneath here, so I peeled it off. I'm 90% sure this is going to end up just being a track car now, because there's obviously some damage in the frame, and underneath the floor you can see it's cracked some of the sound deadener, so I think it might be worse than we thought, but it still drives fine, straight. But now you can definitely be seen on the track with the car. It's acceptable, it looks good, looks clean, looks straight, it's nice and shiny on this side. We've got a mirror so you can see everyone that's getting killed in the distance. I pulled that mirror completely apart, separated into every single piece, and then put it back together. That was quite fun learning how to do that. I forgot to show you guys the A pillar here. It looks pretty good. Most people wouldn't notice unless you get right up close. There's no runs or anything in it, and it looks pretty good. This was glued on, so it's just sitting there for now. But yeah, it's time to put the battery booster pack on. I did want to get a battery for the car, and I was supposed to do the oil and filter for the guys, but they didn't supply any oil or any filter, and I ran out of money for a battery, and they didn't supply a battery, so I didn't do that. But I did raise the rear up. So now they've got the rake that they wanted. Apparently that's going to make it not hit any walls, so we'll see. But yeah, I'm really happy with the bumper, with the lip, with the cold air vent that I've put in there. All sweet. I managed to not get any paint on the engine bay, which was good. A little bit on some of the rubbers back there, but that's all right. Well guys, you asked for it. Some more DIY on the channel. We've DIY painted the whole side of the car and fixed the track damage. If you want to see more about this car, dyno runs, street race runs, track battles, this thing going 200 plus Ks an hour, check out the link at the end of this video. I'll link it in there so you can see the full feature on this car before it was crashed, and see it at the track. There's also another couple of videos, street racing, and also an hour and a half worth of track footage of this car and my car at the track, so make sure you check those videos out. The next project also is going to be DIY. We're going to turn a headlight into an air duct with some fiberglass, body filler, some expanding foam for an air duct for the turbo on my car, so it doesn't get too hot at the track. It's a race use only mod, and it also will show you guys how to do it for your D and B series cars, even your KSWAP cars. You just have to do it on the other side. And it'll teach you guys how to make some stuff with fiberglass, so that'll be fun. So you asked for it, more DIY on the channel. I hope you liked the video. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, spread the word. We're really trying to grow the channel. I'm trying to turn this into a full-time thing, so please spread the love. Thanks for watching, and we'll see ya in the next video.